It's my great honor and pleasure to introduce Richard Louis, who is a journalist and anchor for MSNBC. Louis reports for NBC News and NBC Nightly News and is the news anchor for NBC's Today Show. He joined MSNBC from CNN Worldwide, where he solo anchored the Morning Express on CNN Headline News. When he joined CNN Headline News in 2007, he became the first Asian American male to anchor a daily national news cable show in the US. Now, if we go back a little bit in his career, in 1992 and 94, and a little closer to home, we find that he was a reporter and anchor for the Berkeley radio station KALX, where he was the only live reporter at the San Francisco Bay Bridge during the Rodney King events. He graduated with honors from the Berkeley Department of Rhetoric in 1994 with a honors thesis entitled "The Effects of Electronic Mail on Workgroup Communications." Adrienne Miller, who directed that thesis and now works at Cal Poly, has written that she remembers that he was a, quote, optimistic person who contributed to a positive learning environment for all his student colleagues and for his instructors as well. She adds, he was a role model for other students, always taking time to advise them and support their academic and personal development. He recognized other people's potential for success and encouraged them to realize that potential. And then she added as a note, tell him that I said hello and congratulate him on all his achievements. Richard Louis, we are very honored to congratulate you as well on all your achievements. You are an excellent example of what one might do with a degree in rhetoric.
So I had prepared remarks, but I was digging through my parents' basement this morning, and I found my thesis. So I was thinking I'd just read through it from page one, if you don't mind. 50 pages. Hope you guys got the time. Wow, look at that. You have made it. What an accomplishment, right? You guys feel good? I felt awesome. I remember that day that I was able to celebrate after a long, long trip, which I'll get into a little bit. So congratulations to all of you, film and media and rhetoric graduates of 2011, family, faculty, and friends. What an amazing time you have probably had and an exciting time you will have ahead. I am envious, at the same time extremely proud. If I could do it again, I'd do it. Except 2 decades older, as I am, you'd probably call me uncle, which would start to wear on me. It reminds me I am an uncle, twice in 10 years. In fact, last week, I was having a rather dynamic conversation with my nephew, John. He's 5 years old. He was forced to watch my 1-hour news show every morning for 2 years. You see, my brother would TiVo and make him watch while I was eating breakfast. You thought eating vegetables was tough. So I asked John, I said, John, do you still watch? And he said, yeah, we watch you do your blah, blah, blah. 5 years old, and he calls my job blah, blah, blah. He even waved his hand in the air when he said that, so going blah, blah, blah. 5 years old and he knows how to do that. Charlie Brown's teacher. That droning kazoo-like voice? Wah, 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 wah. That was me. So that tete-a-tete with John reminded me it's not how or what you say, it's whether you are breaking through the wall or people just hearing. Wah, 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 wah. A case in point, as was mentioned, this bad boy right here. My thesis. I spent almost a year writing this in rhetoric undergrad, 50 pages long, and yeah, I still do keep a copy with me at all times because it's so close to me, wherever I go. And it will someday, I think, impress that girl who likes to talk about electronic mail and workgroup communications. And I realize by calling email electronic mail, that kind of dates me, because who calls it electronic mail now? Now, while I've been waiting for that perfect match to happen on various reputable online dating sites over the last 17 years, I looked at a lot of commencement speeches from Winston Churchill to Arnold Schwarzenegger, pre-housemaid. There were the humorous ones, Conan O'Brien, saying he wasn't going back to his alma mater, Harvard, because last he was there, they took tens of thousands of dollars from him. We feel your pain, Conan. Lynn Scher, a fellow journalist from ABC, inspired graduates at Wellesley, holding up the progress of feminism. And Steve Jobs telling 3 simple stories and getting 4 million YouTube viewers after that. But how could have it been? It was, after all, at Stanford, right? You know, I like them all, and at one point, I thought I'd try to put together all of that. You know, put together a humorous feminist message that would get more than 4 million views on YouTube, but that would have been really interesting in the little time we've got. But instead of putting you through that experiment, I'm going to share a countdown of 9 reflections on how to beat the blah, blah, blah that I've been talking about. Number 9, getting fired pays off. It was my first full-time job. Then in her mid-30s, Debbie Fields of Mrs. Fields Cookies, and I got along pretty well with her, probably because my store sold about $1 million in cookies a year, the highest in the company. She would always hug me. You know, I didn't know what to do because of that crazy Asian non-physical affection thing. It's kind of weird. It kind of encroached on that 3-foot protection zone you've got all the time. Nevertheless, she put me in her Inc. magazine article when I was 18, and those were the glory days. But then there were the not-so-glorious days. It reached a point where I didn't agree with middle managers' business decisions, and I began to show it in what I did. They said, "Follow the rules, Richard, or get fired." It was tough. I said goodbye. And that led to the blah be gone and the beginning of my first and my thirst for learning and going to Berkeley. Number 8, take up gardening. Consider some things you like to do today and the things you want to do in the future, and think of them as plants. Unfortunately, we commonly only water one plant at any time in our life, work or relationship, for instance. And we don't water other important plants in life: health, family, hobbies, dreams. But we shouldn't do that. We should try to spend to keep 3 or 4 plants watered simultaneously. Because what happens if the one plant that we water dies? 7, sleep in the nude. Pulitzer Prize winner Russell Baker, that's who I stole it from, said we barely get dressed up to go to a nice restaurant or play nowadays. That's what he says, or go to a play. He asked, why get dressed up to go to sleep? And heck, you know, there are so many other things that are not good for you, you know? Sleeping in the nude, you can do without fear of getting that ticket or damaging your health. 6, think like a senior citizen. I've had some crazy twists and turns in my careers, as Professor Williams was describing. After graduating, I worked at small and Fortune 500 companies, including environmental, manufacturing, tech, banking, and consulting. But after 15 years in business, I got a crazy hair up the Yahoo and wanted to go into journalism. And I thank Berkeley's campus radio station, CalX, for that. My first job in journalism, where I got to report on location for the Rodney King riots and Dianne Feinstein's first Senate seat win. Any CalX folks here? All right. Thought I was the last guy there for a second. That hard right turn to journalism was defining. I remember calling up my dad and saying, you know, I just finished my MBA, got a great job in strategy consulting in Manhattan, On top of that, they are sponsoring my business school tuition. Sounds pretty good. But you know, Dad, I've decided to say no to that and instead join a TV network in Asia. The economics, well, I'll make so little. After I'm done returning my MBA sponsorship, I'll in effect be paying $15,000 to work my first year in journalism. I was a rhetoric major. You know what my dad did? He laughed. He said he always knew I was a little bit crazy. Crazy like a senior citizen, if you will. You see, two questions have taken me through my career. First, if I could do anything in the world, what would I do today? And if I'm not doing that, I'm wasting my time. And second, when I'm 90, this is where the senior citizen part comes in, and I'm looking back on the decision I am making today, will I have any regrets? If so, I know what I need to do. Think like a senior citizen. 5, synergize your career and community work. You know, it's difficult to think global citizenship when we're just trying to keep or learn or get a job. One idea, do community work. That is your job. At CNN, they were kind of cool. You know what they did is they paid for 1 week of volunteer work. I like that. So I spent it to go to Ghana for Habitat for Humanity. While I was there, I filed some stories, including one on Habitat. MSNBC, there I pitched stories related to human trafficking, a space that I also like to volunteer in. If you work in consulting, you can donate free strategy consulting work to nonprofits. Worth tens of thousands of dollars, clients get that for free. And as a lawyer, law clinics offer some high value to nonprofits or needy clients. Think of some compromises as you move forward where you won't have to pick one or the other, but you can achieve both global citizenship and career objectives simultaneously. 4, putting on makeup builds character. I never thought I'd say that publicly. But at my first job, you know, they used to make me up like a geisha girl. Pale, with red cheeks, I kid you not. And that's when I made myself learn how to put on makeup. That's another I never thought I'd say that in public statement, by the way. Full disclosure. But I have learned to laugh at myself, and I can hear myself now saying one day, "Put on your makeup, son, it builds character." 3, learn about your family. My grandfather came here during the Great Depression. He was a farmer for southern China, and he changed careers to become a barber. He passed away before we could ever meet, so that's all I really knew of him, until my grandmother died. At the cemetery after she passed, something was wrong. Her last name, which was prominently chiseled right there on top of the tombstone, said Wong, W-O-N-G. And I was like, "Dad, the Mason has made a mistake. We're Louis." He walked away, asked his older sister what the deal was. And then that was my father, at the age of 40, discovering his real last name was not Louis. It was Wong. My grandfather was an illegal immigrant. He had lied on documents claiming to be the fake son of some U.S. citizen called Mr. Wong. And that's when I learned, was a descendant of an illegal immigrant. Imagine that. I've since reported on this fake son dynamic affecting 1 million people of Chinese descent in the U.S., and there are tens of millions of people of different backgrounds who share a similar story. So take a weekend to learn about your family. Dig deeper. There are many interesting stories on how we or our family got here. By looking back generations, that may show how we are more alike than we are different. 2, be graceful. When I think of grace, it reminds me of a good friend who went to visit her grandma a few years ago. Her grandma was excited to see her and her family, as you can probably imagine, and gave them a tour of her nursing home. And at one point, they passed an old man that was lying on a bed with a respirator who looked paralyzed. As they walked by, her sharp-tongued grandma sniped, "Look at this one. He never has any visitors. I have visitors all the time." Now, a little shocked by her statement, everyone continued on with the tour, but my friend decided to stay back and simply stand next to that man, looking at him. She decided she was his visitor that day, if even for a brief moment. She stood there beside his bed, and after a while, smiled at him. He couldn't move, but his eyes began to well and then tear. She suddenly was also overcome with emotion, still smiling as tears filled her eyes. This visit was only a few minutes, but never forgotten. The way we treat people is important. So consider a hello to those who don't always hear hello, or a simple thank you to those who sacrifice so much for us but seldom hear it. And finally, 1. Keep on learning. I was this close to not graduating, this close. And after 3 years at an academic high school, they finally decided they're going to kick out their worst student, me. I ended up at the district high school where my 2 older brothers and father had graduated. And at the start, I didn't go to class there either. But I remember the moment that I grew up. I was walking down the hall after class, and the principal waved me over, and he said, "Hey, I had a talk with your mom today. She is a school district teacher just like I am. She came to my office this morning with your dad, and I want to let you know she cried." I didn't know my mom had come to school. She didn't tell me, and hasn't for 25 years now. But I knew then it was time for me to try. I eventually graduated from high school with 195 credits. That is 5 short of the district requirement, and with a shining grade point average hovering around 1.0. I walked across that stage only because the principal that I had spoken with a year before signed a waiver. After high school, I didn't go to college, as was mentioned by Professor Williams. Instead, I worked for 4 years at Mrs. Fields Cookies. And then when I realized it wasn't my future, I decided to return to school. First to City College of San Francisco, then UC Berkeley. But Berkeley didn't want me. I was rejected. And I remember that really thin letter. It hurts. It wasn't the way that comeback story was supposed to end. So I wrote an appeal, 1 page, to the point, and 1 week later, I became a bear. In that letter, no BS blah, just my honest passion. I knew I was ready to learn. Now, as you know, we're lucky to have the opportunity to learn. But Berkeley gives us an even more precious gift, the skill of how to learn any subject, any time, any deadline. That's what you can do. A foundation that I believe enables you to see through all of that blah, blah, blah. And with that, that's 9. And you'll notice, by the way, that's 3 times better than Stanford's Steve Jobs speech, which only had 3. Thank you, and congratulations to all the class of 2011. Congratulations.